So the ore, which I'll show you in a second, is commonly referred to as bog ore, bog iron. And the ore comes out of the ground, or comes out of it's really sort of accumulated in those wet areas as a rock like this. So it's raked out of those areas, sifted. It's crushed and heated in a large furnace. Now, the blast furnace, which is the most productive kind of furnace in the 18th century, most efficient use of material, produces cast iron. Cast iron is no good to us. It's great if you want to cast pots or pans or firebacks, but if you want to make a hoe, cast iron is far too brittle. You dig in the ground with a cast iron hoe and it's going to snap in half. So converting cast iron into wrought iron is done at what's called a finery forge, which sort of refines it. It makes it malleable. I can go into the chemical processes if you like, but the basics of it is that it makes it usable for forging objects. Now, wrought iron, which we use, is not castable. It has a melting temperature that is higher than its burning temperature. So, unless you're in a completely deoxygenated environment, it's going to burn up and turn into junk. It'll look like this, in fact. So this is a piece of burned iron. Somebody left it in the forge too long or lost it in the fire, and it just started to disintegrate, break up. So we have this here just to show you all. It's not good to us anymore otherwise. Iron, because it's soft and malleable, can be made into things that you can't with cast iron. So this thin bowl of a spoon, you can't really cast effectively. You'd have to cast something thicker and then grind it down, which wastes metal, so you don't want to do that. But as I mentioned also, things like axes or hoes are good candidates for iron, or in the case of the axes, iron body with a steel edge. So that steel edge is what really takes a lot of impact, and that's where you get it.
So I never realized that when you were wrought something, none of it started as casting. You always beat it to whatever you're doing. That's correct.
Yeah, so we start off with bars of different shapes and dimensions. In fact, I just finished a bunch of trowels for our gardeners down the street. And this is the bar that it starts out as. I actually had to hammer this down for something heavier, but so from that to that, it's about 3.5 inches for the blade, and about an inch or inch and a quarter for the tang. About 4 inches, 4.5 inches to just make a trowel like that. And so we're buying bar in a variety of sizes. So if y'all are familiar with what a rolling mill is, there are rolling mills operating here in the 18th century. Now they're water powered. We're not using steam power for iron making at this point, but it is something that we can buy in, heavy bar. This one's 3-inch square, or very light bar. And so when we make nails, we make it out of bar that's this big in diameter. Typically it's sold as 8 or 9 foot lengths. And it's cheap. Iron is the cheapest metal in the period. It's also the lightest metal. It's the least dense. Pewter, brass, those are all heavier metals for their volume.
Would a place like this make a plow shoe?
Yep, absolutely. In fact, we have that in our records. This business has surviving records. So during the American Civil War, there was a large burning of records at the Capitol in Richmond done by the Confederate government. Thankfully, the County of York did not send their records to Richmond, and so they survived. And one of the day books, which records the activities of the shop from day to day, and a ledger, which is sort of a book of credit that you arrange by the account or by the person. Those both survived. So we actually have a lot of information about this business compared to others in town. In addition, because this business was involved in the military, we know, or it was really a state business in that sense. You know, we're working for the state of Virginia. We have a good idea of how this building was constructed. So with the archaeological surveys on this site, we know where the walls were, where the forges were, where the anvils were, but with surviving records, we know that they used mill-sawn siding for the walls. We know they used cedar shingles on the roof. We know roughly how much glass they used, how many locks they bought for the doors, that sort of thing. So if you haven't heard, I'm working on a cooking fork. I'm nearly done with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But I'm going to hop up to the front with my colleague here, take the fire.
Like something the master reset. Or if they
Well, you mentioned earlier that they didn't really have the to make the molds. So
yeah, so make two for here.